If I had to start over and learn how to play jazz completely from scratch, knowing everything that I know today, this is exactly what I would do. First and most importantly, I would start with rhythm and not notes. Specifically, I would start right here with a 2 feel in my left hand, playing on beats 1 and 3 in the bass, and I'd make sure I play way down here in the bottom octaves, in the same range where an upright bass would play. This is all about rhythm, not about notes, and I would make sure that I am squarely, perfectly in the pocket. Knowing what I know now, even a slight deviation from the pocket would kill the swing feel. So if I were starting over today, I would spend hours doing this over lots of tunes at lots of different tempos. You might think that our next step would be to add the chords, but you would be wrong. Rhythm is the most important, followed by the melody, and then the chords. This can actually be pretty tricky because it requires some coordination between the hands. I'm not trying to play the melody literally from what the lead sheet says. I'm kind of singing the melody to myself in my head and letting it swing and come out naturally, and I'm matching that feel that I hear in my head with my hands in my playing. But while you're doing all of that, you can't let your left hand fall out of the pocket. Before I get into the chords, I would spend even more time on the rhythm. And we can upgrade our feel in the bass to a 4 feel simply by repeating the notes from the 2 feel. And pay attention to my articulation. We're just playing quarter notes, so there's no swing rhythm yet, but the swing feel comes entirely from this articulation. A slight emphasis on beats 2 and 4. And of course, gotta keep the 4 feel square, perfect in the pocket. Now I'm gonna put the melody aside for a minute and I'm gonna replace my right hand with simple 2-note chord voicings. And I wanna play those voicings every time the chord changes in the tune. These voicings are using the 3rd and the 7th from the chord, and I wanna play them here in the middle of the piano, maybe even a little bit below middle C. And make sure you don't fall out of the pocket. Now, playing these chords just on the downbeats is pretty dull rhythmically, and rhythm is the best way to sound cool. So I'm going to play them with 3 different patterns. First, let's try the Charleston. And next, we'll flip the script and we'll do the reverse Charleston. And finally, a syncopated pattern inspired by the great Red Garland. Now, of course, we can't let this rhythm get monotonous, otherwise we get boring. So let's vary up our playing by using all 3 patterns. And once I've completely mastered all 3 of them, I'm just gonna follow my ears and let the rhythm flow. And while we're doing it here over the 4 feel, don't forget, we gotta do it over the 2 feel also. Notice through all of this, never fall out of the pocket. Alright, so the rhythm is feeling pretty cool now, but how do we bring the melody back in? Well, I gotta free my right hand again to be able to cover the melody, so I'm gonna drop the bass line, and I'm gonna do this comping in my left hand instead. Keep that rhythm solid, and don't fall out of the pocket. We're only a third of the way through this approach, but as soon as you learn something new, I want you to let me know that by hitting the like button at exactly that moment. Rewind if you have to. Rewind if you have to. Make sure you click the button precisely at the time you learn something new. All right, let's work on the melody again. And this is quite a challenge because now we have 2 different rhythms in each of our hands, and we have to learn how to play them together without dropping a beat. Gotta stay in the pocket. So I'm gonna start with something simpler first. Just 2 eighth notes back to back. First here on beat 1. Then here on beat 2. On beat 3. On beat 4. Don't forget, gotta do the offbeats too. On the and of 2. On the and of 3. And last but not least, the and of 4. And right now I'm playing with the Charleston rhythm in my left hand, but of course we've got to do this across all 3 of our different comping rhythms. And the whole time you do this, got to keep that rhythm solid. Don't fall out of the pocket. I have to resist the urge to move on from this too quickly. See, our melody lines are made up of phrases, and these phrases could start at any of these 8 different places in the measure. These 8 melodic rhythms are basically the only way that a melodic line can start. So if I can nail these rhythmically, playing the proper melody will be much easier. How do you know when you're struggling with a phrase? Because you fall out of the pocket, and you know the rule. We never fall out of the pocket. Next up is the third hand technique. We have 3 different parts of the song we've been practicing: the bass, the melody, and the chords. But I only have 2 hands. So I either have to grow a third hand, or I have to learn how to share all 3 of these responsibilities with just the 2 hands that I have. I think the first thing that I'll do is work on the right hand. So let's get back to having the left hand just play the bass, and my right hand playing the melody. But whenever there's an opportunity for my right hand to reach down and play chords in our comping rhythm, I'm gonna take it. But when you stab the chords, make sure your rhythm is solid. Don't fall out of the pocket. But sometimes I want chords to fall while the melody is playing too, and since I can't sacrifice the melody, I'll use my left hand to cover both the bass and the chords. I don't actually need the bass line all the time. It's quite fine to just play chords, even without the root, so long as you come back to the bass every once in a while. But while your left hand's jumping around, keep that rhythm solid, don't fall out of the pocket. Alright, so now that I'm comfortable doing 2 things with either my right hand or my left hand, I can put all of them together. Sometimes I'll reach down and play chords with my right, sometimes I'll reach up with my left. I remember how long it took me to get comfortable with this. Frankly, it took me months of dedicated practice, and realistically, I probably should have spent even a lot more time on it. See, there's a lot of coordination here. The problem is, when your hands are jumping around, it's really easy to lose the rhythm, and we can't let ourselves fall out of the pocket. Now notice up to this point, we haven't really done anything fancy. There's no chordal voicings, there's no diminished scales or altered scales, there's not even altered dominant chords. But yet this sounds so good. Why? Because the rhythm is perfect. If you get that rhythm and articulation right, man, it's infectious. And this approach doesn't just work for this song either. It works on basically anything. But let's take it up a notch. Everything I'm showing you in this video is part of my work at jazzlibrary.com. I would really encourage you to join my newsletter over there. Each week I share my own exploration of the jazz language and tips to become a better player, and you can join me over there with 5,000 other jazz players who are all putting these same ideas into their playing too. So far, I've only played chords as part of our comping rhythm, but we can also use those chord tones to harmonize the melody. I'm going to listen for key moments in the melody, and I'm going to emphasize those moments by playing other notes underneath them. There are many ways I can do this, but I really like looking for places where the melody is the 3rd or the 7th of the chord, and then I play the other note underneath it. Got to be super careful and controlled here. Rhythm has to be perfect, and don't fall out of the pocket. With these techniques, my right hand is starting to sound much more sophisticated, but the left hand is still just playing a pretty simple bass line. And to be fair, this is totally fine. In fact, I probably play simple bass lines on my gigs more than anything else, but I should practice walking a bass line too. The job of the walking bass is to establish the chord at the start of the measure, and then to guide the ear to the next chord by walking up or walking down towards it. I have to make sure to stick the landing though, hitting the note of the next chord right as the chord changes. And once I can walk this bass line confidently, I'm going to put the right hand back. This is pretty tricky. It takes quite a bit of practice to do this without falling out of the pocket. Alright, finally I would take the time to upgrade my chords. This was a huge monumental mistake that I made when I first learned how to play. I started focusing on complex chords way too soon, and while those chord voicings sound hip, I couldn't play them comfortably or with cool rhythm, not without sacrificing the melody anyway. And if you haven't figured it out yet, I'm pretty passionate about the importance of rhythm. If we're gonna play cool chords, you gotta play them in the pocket. Now, chords are a big topic. I would start by upgrading our 2-note chords to 3-note chords, probably by adding the 9th, and then I'd look at other extensions too. Of course, we can't let our right hand have all of the fun. Our left hand has to play these voicings too. Gotta really practice those chord shapes so we can play them solid, because we don't want to fall out of the pocket. So far, I've largely been treating chords and melody as separate ideas, but they definitely don't have to be. We can play our hands locked rhythmically, where the right and the left hand play rhythm together with the melody on top. To do this, we're playing our melody in octaves, adding a perfect fifth, and playing our fancy chords in the left hand. But the rhythm between the two hands is exactly the same. And while I'm performing, I need to pay attention to how monotonous my playing is becoming. Listen to some Oscar Peterson, and you'll hear him switch between comping and locked hands constantly. And Oscar's the master. He never falls out of the pocket. My next big step is going to be improvising, and this is a lifetime of study and practice, but there are a few things I can do to get started. First, I can start just by improvising short fills during breaks in the melody, or at the end of the section as we loop back around another time through. I can also follow the melody loosely while improvising over top of it, kind of keep the key notes of the melody the same, but explore different ways to create phrases to get in and out of those key notes. And from that point, I can start biting off bigger sections of the tune and taking whole solos. And I would start this by thinking of the rhythm first, then building a motif off of that rhythm, and then letting my ear guide me the rest of the way. I could spend months talking about the art of crafting solo lines. And next week, I'm releasing a premium video course that guides you through that step by step, but I'm not asking you to pay for it. If you sign up for the newsletter I mentioned down in the description, I will invite you to that course for free when it launches in a few days. But now that I have a solid foundation with these techniques, it's time to get into the fancy stuff. And there's no end to this. I could explore blues scales, modes, altered scales, diminished scales, pentatonic runs, stride patterns, bell tones, and a million other things. But you know, none of the fancy stuff sounds good unless you can do it while you're staying in the pocket. And every song needs a solid ending. Like this one, classic bassy ending. That's a 1 to 2 minor to flat 3 diminished, back to a fancy 1 chord. Remember my golden rule of playing jazz. Don't fall out of the pocket. Simple ideas with solid rhythm will make you sound like a pro, but complex notes and fancy scales will all sound amateurish if you play them with lousy rhythm. So you can choose your own adventure with what to watch next. Here's a whole bunch of videos that go deeper on these techniques.